Donald Trump ordered strikes on Iran. And while the world was still processing what that meant, Mark Carney picked up the phone and called the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia directly.
And he answered. The leader of the country that Trump has spent a year trying to humiliate got a direct line to the man who controls more oil than any nation on earth except Russia.
And that access alone is a signal. But what came out of that conversation is what makes this a genuine geopolitical turning point. Because what came out of that conversation was not just pleasantries. It was a 5-sector cooperation framework: energy, Agri-Food, critical minerals, defense, and aerospace. And every single one of those pillars is ground Canada has not occupied before. Now let's get into those 5 pillars. We're going to go through each one because this is where the real story is, and it's not the one that the headlines are telling. You don't hear this at all in mainstream media, but we're going to cover it here.
Energy is the headline, sure. But what Saudi Arabia is actually doing in this conversation goes well beyond the barrel count. They're building a relationship with the supplier that does not come with geopolitical strings, cartel obligations, or the unpredictability that has defined Washington's energy posture for the last 18 months.
Pillar 2, Agri-Food. And this one is genuinely underappreciated. Canada is the world's largest exporter of durum wheat. The wheat that goes into pasta, couscous, and the flatbread across the Middle East and Northern Africa. Canada is also the world's dominant canola exporter and a major supplier of pulses and protein crops.
Saudi Arabia imports the overwhelming majority of its food. That dependency isn't comfortable for a kingdom that just watched supply chains get disrupted from multiple directions simultaneously. A reliable democratic food supplier with stable governance is not just commercially useful, it's strategically essential.
Pillar 3, critical minerals. And here's the distinction from what we've covered previously, because we're not talking about LNG pipelines this time. We're talking about lithium, cobalt, and rare earth minerals, the inputs to every battery, every weapons guidance system, every electric motor being manufactured on Earth right now.
Saudi Arabia is spending hundreds of billions of dollars building a post-oil economy. New cities, data centers, renewable energy installations, a domestic defense industrial base. Every single one of those projects requires critical minerals that Canada has in the ground in quantities that very few countries can match.
Yeah, Canada is a supplier that Saudi Arabia does not currently have a deep formal relationship with. So this call is the opening move in changing that.
Pillar 4 is defense. Canada's defense sector includes some of the most sophisticated military training and simulation companies on Earth. CAE, which is based in Montreal, trains more military pilots globally than any other organization in the world.
Yep, Saudi Arabia is building serious domestic military capability. They need training infrastructure, simulation systems, and aerospace maintenance capacity. Canadian companies are world-class at exactly those 3 things. Bombardier is in this conversation as well, and those are real contracts with real Canadian jobs and real revenue attached to them.
The 5th pillar is aerospace. Canada has one of the most advanced aerospace manufacturing and maintenance systems outside the United States. Saudi Arabia is building that capacity domestically and is actively looking for partners that are not politically entangled with their regional adversaries.
So Canada fits that description also. Democratic, rule of law, not party to any conflict in the Middle East, and now apparently the kind of country whose prime minister receives a formal invitation to visit Riyadh.
MBS invited Carney to Saudi Arabia. Yep, that's true. A crown prince doesn't extend that invitation casually. That's a protocol-level signal to the entire diplomatic world that Canada is a country the kingdom intends to deal with at the highest level going forward.
Washington has not received a comparable signal from Riyadh. That omission is a story unto itself.
Yeah, it is. But let's talk about why Saudi Arabia made this particular calculation right now, because the timing is not coincidental. As usual, the Gulf is under pressure from multiple directions at once. Iran struck Saudi territory. The UAE has moved away from OPEC's coordinated production schedule, which is a crack in the cartel agreement that has set global prices for decades.
Yes, when OPEC's own members stop following the production agreements, every major energy importer in the world starts looking for supply relationships that are not dependent on cartel coordination or Gulf stability. Canada's position on that list just moved up very significantly.
And here's what's genuinely damaging for Trump. He went into the Iran campaign expecting Saudi Arabia to back him. I guess all that sucking up didn't do him any good.
No.
And he's now watching the Crown Prince build a parallel diplomatic track with a country he has publicly threatened, insulted, and tried to economically coerce for over a year.
That's not a diplomatic embarrassment. That is a strategic failure. Because the entire logic of Trump's pressure on Canada was that Canada had nowhere else to go. Saudi Arabia just added another destination to that list, a significant one.
And the list just keeps growing. Mexico City, Brussels, Helsinki, Tokyo, and now Riyadh. Each one of those conversations represents a Canada that is no longer dependent on Washington's goodwill to function in the world.
Listen, Saudi Arabia is not a simple partner. It has major human rights record that cannot be brushed aside just because oil prices got excited.
Exactly. A serious foreign policy does not mean pretending every partner is perfect, and Saudi is far from perfect, but it means dealing with the world as it is. Canada can cooperate where our business interests align without handing out moral blank checks. And Prime Minister Carney has said that repeatedly.
And listen, that's a really important distinction because engagement is not endorsement. Diplomacy is not a friendship bracelet. And frankly, if Canada wants influence in a messy world, it has to talk to powerful countries. Refusing to pick up the phone does not make Canada more ethical. It just makes Canada less relevant. So the question is whether Canada walks into that Riyadh meeting with a real strategy, prepared, specific, and ready to deliver on all 5 of those pillars.
Because that is now the test. The 5-sector framework only matters if Canada can actually deliver across all 5 sectors. The Carney government has been moving faster on project approvals than any government in recent memory. The question is whether that pace is fast enough to meet a diplomatic window that is moving, it seems, even faster.
Yeah, so here's our opinion. The Saudi call is not a side story. It's actually one of the most significant diplomatic moments Canada has had in the Gulf in a generation. Trump went to war in the Middle East without his allies and came out with a diminished position in Riyadh. Carney, he stayed measured and came out with it with 5 sectors on the table and an invitation to the kingdom.
That result, it wasn't luck. It is the outcome of 12 months of deliberate diplomatic work across multiple continents while Trump was busy running an economic war on his own neighbor. Canada no longer can rely on our usual allies. We can't go it alone. We can't take the moral high ground and think that the world will just fall into place. It's time for Canada to take action.
So we want to hear from you. Should Canada be trading with countries like Saudi Arabia that have questionable morals?
Or can we lead by example and still keep our morality intact? And if we're dealing with the United States anyway, is there really any difference in today's world?
Let us know what you think in the comments because we definitely love hearing from you and we read every one of those comments.
So make sure to like it, share it, hype it, and subscribe. And if you want to help support this channel, check out the pinned comment where we have links to our merch store, our private Facebook group, as well as the A-Team and Substack.
Thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.